Hi, welcome to Self-Generated Podcast. My name's Steve. I'm the host and creator. You've come across the next episode in which we are going to be exploring or having a conversation about the idea of complexity, and that it may be a conversation you've never heard before, and how thinking about complex things is one of the biggest and greatest talents that one can have. It's really a reflection of actual intelligence, and not to put people down, but to empower people to have greater capability versus the overly simplistic narratives that they live on. And yeah, that can sound a little pushy, a little punchy, but that's what I'm talking about, is that we live in our stories, of our stories. And that's not to remove authenticity away from you. That's to acknowledge that if we work through active inference and body cognition and the extended mind, that is a way of describing it. And that in order to look at it, determine if it's right or wrong, we have to be able to handle it in a logical way, separate from what we believe to be true. And that is difficult, not just because of some arbitrary thing in your character or your bias, is that thinking about what you are in an overly simplistic way makes you miss the opportunities or miss the reality of how you actually work through active inference and body cognition and the extended mind. And that anything that challenges your belief system, you can inherently experience in the negative unless you have conditioned yourself otherwise. And then if you stop and then you start to think about it, are you then trying to validate or invalidate the thing innately? Most people who are experiencing something like that, they go, oh, that guy's an asshole. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That must be bullshit. That's oversimplification. We do it to ourselves because we're taught to do that. We're not taught to, hey, that's a warning sign for us to check what we think is true. We're not taught that, one, because we don't know that is the case. I just happen to believe it. It's just my humble opinion. But two, if they did, we would not be able to live in the world that we live in today. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by we wouldn't be able to live in that world today? Is that our world runs on oversimplification. I had ended the last talk talking about how education kind of keeps us in this simple way. And that if you want to look at it in a more deep, complex way, that education to prepare you to be a citizen of the world, one would think, or at least there can be an argument made, that it would be superior to make more cognitively capable people, critical thinkers. But in no way, shape, or form in mass education does it really, really focus on that. It focuses on memorization, focuses on passing standardized tests and showing up in order for the school to get paid. These things alter the outcome of what a real education is. We miss that because we talk about it in the very simple, education is good, no education is bad. It might not sound that way, but if you even read articles, you read between the lines and you look at the truth behind the statements, and you actually break it down and you remove the emotionality out of it, of like, oh yes, I love education. Of course, think of the children. And you look at it and you go, oh, wait a minute. I wonder what this is about. And what we do here on Self-Generator, what I'm trying to do, is just prepare people and give people a way of understanding and how to actually look at these ideas and be comfortable with them. You don't have to love them, but not actively hating them allows you to embrace complexity. And embracing the complexities of the world is empowering. What it actually is I'm just rephrasing the idea of understanding and wisdom versus some ethereal thing into something that you can actually touch and do something about, that you can have actual control over versus just talk about. And that's the difference, is that a lot of things that we do, we just kind of talk about. And that when push comes to shove, these things don't really add up. But the problem is we don't have a push comes to shove. We don't deal with it in the complexity that it is. Even if we think we are, we're actually adopting a new, different simplicity. You feel lost. You feel that you can't find yourself, that modern society has failed you. There's a multitude of self-help to fads that you could jump on that are based off of very simple ideas, mostly nostalgia, that it used to be better back in a certain point, and that you can find that emotional twinge with that and capture onto that. The traditional life, living out in the woods, whatever it might be, or the possible future of being able to be whatever you want to be, irrespective of the realities of the world. And that these simplistic ideas are what govern us. They're what is advertised to us. And that when you look under the hood, there's questions to be had. And it's not to throw the whole thing out, but it's literally just not applying 100% oversimplification and certainties to things. Applying the ability to apply a mental 70% to something, I know that might be difficult for people to understand, but I can't think of another better way to describe it. And that if you can experience that and understand what I'm saying, that's a transition. That's what I'm talking about. That's being able to move past simplicity into another layer of complexity. Is that you don't have to 100% love me or 100% hate me. You can 50-50, you can 60-40, you can 60-20-20. But are you mentally doing that? Think about a lot of the things that you interact with in the world and in life. How often do you jump to absolutes? That's what I'm talking about. That's an oversimplification. Guy cuts you off. He's an asshole. Your boss messed up. You fucked up. I'm a piece of shit. I'm an asshole. My boss is an asshole. What are those? Those are oversimplifications. That's not being able to handle looking at the complexity of, oh, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe my boss had a bad day. Maybe I'm working at the wrong place. Maybe I need to be more mindful of my work. Maybe I need to handle my other issues that are going on that I'm not acknowledging that are now interfering with my work. Those questions don't get answered or even acknowledged as questions because of the nature of the embracing of simplicity in which we are sold, told, and educated in. And that it is partly emotionality. It's how we internally experience it. We call it emotions, we call it sensations, feelings. But there is a driving force to us that, if my humble opinions are correct and that we live through active inference and body cognition, when something goes against your model of the world, what you believe to be true, you receive something called an error signal. And what that is doing is it's saying, hey, you need to either update your model, meaning how you interpret and predict how things work, or you need to do something. So like, when you see a snake, snakes are bad. The certainty of a snake around you increases the likelihood of you dying. It creates a sensation of anxiety, so that either you are horribly anxious or you act, meaning you smack it, you leave, you do the other things. This system, as simple as it sounds, can explain your behavior, my behavior, but it's different than how you think. It's counter to how you've been told. And I try to keep it simple when explaining it, even though there's a great deal more complexity. These things are the underpinnings of artificial intelligence. It's a lot of math, Bayesian inference. There's a way more I can get into it, but we're simple creatures. We are taught to learn things simply. So we start simply. And that's not to demean or undermine. That's to acknowledge reality for what it is. And maybe, just maybe, if we do that, we can get better results. So for example, how we could look at it differently, let's take a look at the Me Too cancel movement. Now, when these, big ticket people come up and are found out to be insidious creepwads and are finally, after a very long period of time and a lot of stories that have leaked, finally, when the floodgates open, are taken down, we never really stop and look at the totality of the situation. It is how you and I would normally digest it via the media, is the sad and very righteous stories of the victims and how much of an utter piece of shit the person is. And it's not that those things are wrong. Those are true. But that's what gets the clicks. That's what people view. That's what people engage with. And that forms our very view, our very belief of everything. And that we miss key points of, like, why does this keep happening? We would assume it's disguise. It's just certain X, Y, Z. But when you really look at it, it's core to the nature of power. It's core to the nature of the systems that we have, that the entertainment industry is very unique in that it's isolated and it's kind of self-governing, and there are rules about it, but a lot of those rules have been more written by them through their lobbyists than by actual politicians, even if that were to matter. And that they're able to live in this isolated little bubble that has an immense amount of power over an average citizen. What do I mean by that is that they have a great deal of control over what we view as true, what we think matters. Everything, your movies, TV, entertainment, a lot of these things shape culture far greater than any other power, and that they move really unregulated, even if what regulations would you give, but they're able to operate pretty much and do whatever the fuck they want. And that this is a byproduct of that this is the system allowed to do what it is. And you can then argue, at least I think I can argue, that that's one of the reasons we see such low quality content now. It's because it just doesn't matter. You can make promises, oversimplifications, and just produce and produce and produce and hit, nostalgia hits after nostalgia hit. And it's not a creative, amazing system what we would think it would be. What I guess I'm getting at is that the entertainment system and the entertainment complex as a whole is not this oversimplification that we think it is. And you can see it in the results. And if you're able to step back and really look at the quality of the majority of content, and don't get me wrong, it's been like this for a while, but especially as of late, and that it doesn't have to be very good at all. It just has to hit the markers. It has to be colorful and engaging and have the right looking people. And that's, again, it's been that for a while, but it's just the numbers now. It's not anything in between. And it's because the oversimplification has taken over. The algorithm has taken over. Oversimplification and not looking at things for their complexity and not building individual people who are able to look at it in a complex way is a great deal of our problems now. We have AI and all these things that inhibit our ability to understand if something is real, fake news. All of these things are not going to be solved by the system. They can only be solved by us being more capable of discerning what is real. And we literally live in a world that does not prepare us for that, that in fact prepares us to be almost the opposite, because that's the nature of the system and how it works. And that when we look at these things, in the simplicity versus the complexity, we have to stop because of the emotionality. The simplicity, capitalism, right? Capitalism good, everything else bad. I say I'm going to talk anti-capitalism. You assume I'm talking about communism. Communism can go fuck itself just as much as capitalism. What I'm talking about is that if we look at the system, capitalism in and of itself is a system. It's just something that you would use as a tool, but we use it as a backbone of society. And there is problems there when you go from the simple to the complex. For example, the cornerstone of economics is that every person who's making a transaction is making a rational decision in their best interest. It's kind of the corner of ethics in business, is that individual consumers are acting in their own best interests. And that is utter bullshit. You're advertised, you're lied to, you are led to believe things are true that are not. Money back guarantees, gimmicks, sales. Macy's will be perpetually 60% off. It's because it's marked up 3 times. All right. It's a ruse. And how can somebody make a transactional decision that's in their best interest when all of their information that they're basing it off of is not necessarily true? And it's overly simplified and literally, in many cases, a lie. And if that does happen, or if they're caught lying, it's a slap on the hand. There's no real ramifications. Well, if I say all those things, and if those things are true, then that's very disturbing for most people. Then how can all of these things be true? How can our systems work? Well, the reality of it is that there is truth in what I say, and the systems do work. And able to look at it and handle it and find out what is true to you is to be able to handle complexity. And not just the simplicity of what I say, or the simplicity of what somebody else says, or the simplicity of what you believe. To be able to look at alternate stories without having to shun the storyteller, without having to burn the pages of the story. That is the ability, or the cornerstone of the ability, to embrace and understand complexity. And we're given minds that are perfectly capable of doing this. It's totally in their wheelhouse. It's totally in the wheelhouse of a human brain. These brains have been functioning pretty much as is for at least 100,000 years. And only really the last 5,000 years have we had all this organization, things, proto-civilizations to civilization and writing. But we've been around humans because we work together. We're social animals. We communicate, we use language and understanding. And that in order to do that, we have to start simply. And that we don't need to understand everything. If we did, we wouldn't have gotten as far as we have. But we are at a point now where we can move past the old styles of thinking. But the problem is you can't just learn new things. You have to unlearn the old ones sometimes. You have to let go of things that you thought were true because they're not. And that's where the rub is. And it goes back to being able to be comfortable and okay with an uncomfortable idea. That is core to you. That is core to being a free individual in the modern world. And it's not an overnight thing, but it can be improved. And I believe the main way to improve it is through understanding, practicing, talking about it, and acting it, and seeing for yourself, and seeing with others. Things are far more complex. You already know that. Be comfortable and excited about exploring them. Be comfortable with whatever the answers might be. You don't have to automatically accept them, but if you automatically hate them, that's what you want to work on. That will empower you. Maybe you haven't heard that before. Maybe you have. But the idea is that complexity even is just a series of simple things happening in a certain order, in a certain way. You just have to be more open to more than the few that you have already accepted. bit by bit, but it's in everything. Your politics, your life, what you eat, how you sleep, who you are, your very sense of you, how you perceive me right now. If you're open to understanding all those things to a greater detail, it can empower you. Because what you experience, how you experience the world, how you judge, how you do everything is based off of what you believe to be true. Not just as a, oh, it's kind of like that, as a literal, definitively, it is that. And that's what we explore here on Self-Generated, the deeper complexities.